All right, we made it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Swedenborg and Life. First of all, my name is Curtis Childs, and I'm with the Swedenborg Foundation. The Swedenborg Foundation is a nonprofit group whose mission is basically to get the ideas, the insights in what Swedenborg wrote out into the conversation of the world. So that's what you and I are kind of doing here today. So thanks for showing up. I really appreciate it. I said the show is called Swedenborg and Life, and it's going to be a discussion of some things that Swedenborg wrote, or a discussion that's kind of formed by some things Swedenborg wrote, but really it's about life. I mean, we're not going to be talking about Swedenborg as a person. We're going to be talking about things that really matter to all of us. You know, life after death. Where do we go? What happens? What is the nature of the deeper realities? So that's kind of part of why we called it that. And the group itself serves a couple of functions. One is to try to get a sort of a group discussion of spiritual topics, currently life after death, and that will be through you guys being able to comment and have some input into what we're doing here. And then also, it's a bit of a reading assist group for Swedenborg. We're going to be reading this book, which is, you can see there, Our Life After Death. And Swedenborg can be difficult to read. If you don't know who Swedenborg is, I guess I better back up and give you some of that. A very long story short, he was a scientist in like the 1700s, 1750s, who was at the top of his fields. He was doing really well, but all of a sudden he started to have a change in his life. It began with dreams that were getting more and more vivid and were getting more and more intense and more meaningful. But those evolved into, he began having more and more, and eventually he was having what we would now call spiritual experiences or near-death experiences. And he began having these consistently day after day, and it completely changed his life. He saw the other side. He saw angels and spirits and what makes us who we are, learned about God and life after death, all this kind of stuff. And so from there on out, his career totally, took a left turn, and he began publishing about all this stuff that he learned. And it's probably one of the most extensive recordings of spiritual experiences ever had. So it's obviously of interest to anybody who's got any kind of need to know, or you're looking for something in that direction. But reading Swedenborg is not always easy. There's the time gap. He was writing a couple hundred years ago, but also because of the newness of the nature of what he's describing, he'll use words and phrases in ways that we're not accustomed to. He's got this whole world that he wrote like 27 books on life after death, and these were long books. Or not just life after death, on everything. These are long books, big things. So it can get hard to get in there without knowing the whole thing. It's hard to, what's he talking about here, what's he talking about there. Even people who know him pretty well can still get lost on things. So we're kind of going to look through the text together, and that will provide a framework. It doesn't have to be all about Swedenborg. Oh, by the way, you can download this book to read if you want. The Swedenborg Foundation is offering it for free as a PDF or as an ebook. You just go to this link here. If you want to type that in, or wherever you're watching, if you're watching on YouTube, just look at the description there, or if you're watching on Facebook, just look at the description there. We put this link into both of those. And let's see. So you can get that. Oh, and what we're going to do is walk through it together and take a look, because there's so many things that you've got to know other parts of Swedenborg to understand the parts of Swedenborg that we're going through and all that stuff. So it's going to be a good journey, and it's a good jumping off point for even if you don't agree with everything Swedenborg is reporting. It's just one man's reports. That's fine, but it's just, I found it's a good way to start discussion and to get people thinking. And it's always just, I find, interesting to hear, what do people say? What are people saying they've been through? What do they say is on the other side? You take it, you weigh it, see how it feels, and hopefully, you guys can comment and ask questions and see what's important to you. So there we are. Yeah, the how-tos. If you're watching it on youtube.com/offtheLeftEye, just write comments below the video like you'd comment on any other video. We'll look at those. We'll try to get them up on screen here so that we can answer your questions live during the show. Facebook, you probably have to click through the link to get to YouTube. If you don't have a YouTube account, go back to the Facebook page where you click the link and leave comments there, and we'll get to them. And we'll try to, or questions, or whatever's on your mind, and we'll try to address it. So I would say now I've given a pretty good sized intro. Let's look at the text itself. So here's the book. This is the PDF version right off of Swedenborg.com. And we're down where the text starts. Before this, there were like translator notes and an intro, which are worth looking at because everything you can learn about the context helps you understand the message. But we're going to start here with what the world of spirits is. Remember, this is Swedenborg describing what he'd heard and seen. The world of spirits is neither heaven nor hell, but a place or a state of being between the two. Okay, I'd like to start. See that you got to start right there. A place or a state of being. Normally, we don't equate those two things. Like you don't say, where were you for vacation? Did you go to Florida or did you go to Hawaii? Oh, I went to Happy. You know, a state of being, or I went to Patience. You know, a state of being is not the same thing as a place. But in Swedenborg's cosmology or worldview, in the spiritual world, which is the world that we go into after death, but also the world that the spirit in all of us is currently in, they're the same thing. State of being and place are interchangeable, and the kind of mindset you have determines where you go. And that, of course, we could talk about that forever, but we never would get past the first sentence. So hopefully there's a few little pointers. Let's look a little bit farther. So he's talking about the world of spirits. He's introducing this place to us called the world of spirits. It is where we first arrive after death. From there, in due course, we are either raised into heaven or thrown into hell, depending on how we have lived in the world. This is a red flag here. Thrown into hell. If I were just picking up Swedenborg, I'd be like, what's that? What thrown? That I don't want that to happen. I don't want to get thrown into hell. What is it? This is a little bit archaic. What is that? There's like an angry, punishing God. And this is why you need to have a group like this, because Swedenborg doesn't mean what he says there. Well, if you look at the wording, it says thrown into hell, and you sort of think, oh yeah, people come from outside of you and throw you into hell. And what he means by hell is a whole other conversation, which we're going to get into too. But let me try to break this up into two things. First of all, the thrown in. Nobody forces you to go anywhere in the next life. You choose where you want to go based on your deeper desires and what you've cultivated in this world and where you want to head. So I'm going to actually, it's from this same book, Our Life After Death. This little guy is a subsection of Heaven and Hell, which is one of his his most popular book. It's not actually one of his bigger books physically or a number of pages, but this is a piece of that. Because we're trying to make it easier to read. And in Heaven and Hell, in another place, he talks about this being thrown into hell and how it's not actually that at all. So I'm going to read from Heaven and Hell to give you guys a little speed on that. So this is just shorthand for Heaven and Hell 548. All of his books have these little paragraph numbers, which makes it easier to navigate because there's so much material. He says, when we arrive in the other life, we are first taken up by angels who do everything for us and also tell us about the Lord, heaven. The Lord is his term for God, an angelic life, and offer us lessons in what is good and true. So it sounds like a good start. However, if we are the kind of people, I better keep reading that actually. However, if we are the kind of people who have been familiar with things like this in the world, but have denied or rejected them at heart, then after some conversation, we want to get away from them and try to leave. So nobody's telling you have to get away from this. If you're there and you're saying, this is boring, this is lame, I want out of here. We can see from this that the Lord is leading every spirit, but when he says spirit, he means person. I mean, that's us, our spirit. When we go into the next life, we just don't have a physical body. We're in spirit form, which we'll talk about more later. There's so much to talk about. Every spirit toward himself through angels and through an inflow from heaven. But that spirits who are absorbed in evil resist strenuously and virtually tear themselves away from the Lord. They are drawn by their evil as though it were a rope. And because they are drawn and want to follow because of their love of evil, it follows that they freely cast themselves into hell. We can now see that the Lord does not throw anyone into hell. We throw ourselves in. So, and there's a ton of terms I'm hitting you. What is hell? What are spirits? And I know we're gonna get there. And there's a lot of definitions for those things, but he has his own specific one that we're gonna take a peek at. But first, I just want to say that, so if you're just reading Our Life After Death, you come across that it says, oh, we're thrown into hell. It sounds like sort of the traditional Christian view of you're judged and then you're forced into a place of torment. But that's not what his message is. It's not even close, which is why you have to get the whole picture before you can get into those kind of nuances. So let's get back to the text. Was that a long enough tangent? Okay, I hope so. Okay, so depending on how we have lived in the world. We're going to talk more about hell and what hell is. It's not the traditional definition of a place of torture. It's a like he says before, all places are states. We'll get there. Okay, so hold judgment till we get there. It became clear to me that it is a halfway place when I saw that the hells were underneath it and the heavens above it, and that it is a halfway state of being when I learned that as long as we are in it, we are not yet in either heaven or hell. So you see that juxtaposition again of state and place. In the following pages where I say spirits, I mean people in the world of spirits, while by angels, I mean people in heaven. And you see here his people, so it's all people. And in his view, there's nobody who was created as like has always been in the afterlife. Just like there's nobody on earth who's an adult but has never been a kid or an adult. Everybody's gone through the same process. And when you get to the other side, you can be called a spirit if you're still in the place/state of the world of spirits, which we'll talk about that more. I feel everything, this is why you have to have this group, because everything needs to be explained further and further and further. And I'll try to do my best to confuse you as much as I can. So if you're in the state, in the place, which is the world of spirits, you're called a spirit. If you get to the state and place, which is called heaven, then you're called an angel. But it's all about what's going on inside of you, and consequently where that puts you outside in the afterlife. Anyway, too much. So that's just a little bit of what we're going to get into, but trust me, it's going to be okay. We're going to look at it more. So there's just a little thought on some gathering and meeting. There's this whole theme of that in the world of spirits, as he describes it, everybody can get together and meet people of all kinds. You know, obviously it's a big party because everybody, you know, who's died is there mingling. But what would that? So we talk about it in theory, and what would it be like? You know, what would that gathering actually be? Let's take a look at what he says a little bit about it. There's a vast number of people in the world of spirits, because that is where everyone is first gathered and where everyone is examined and prepared. There is no fixed limit to our stay there. Some people barely enter it and are promptly either taken up into heaven or thrown down into hell. But, as we said, thrown down meaning you say, that's exactly where I want to go. You can't hold me back. And trust me that is what he's talking about. We'll get into it. I always say we'll get into it more because we will, if not in this episode, in other ones. Some stay there for only a few weeks, others for a number of years, though not more than 30. And it's got to be some kind of approximation because, as he says later, time doesn't really exist there in the same way that it does here. The variations in the length of our stay occur because of the correspondence or lack of correspondence between our deeper and outer natures. So this word here, correspondence, you're probably familiar with that word, but maybe not in the context. If you get into Swedenborg with any kind of seriousness, or you're covering any amount of ground, you're going to see that word correspondence come up a ton. And it means different things than correspondence can be like a written thing, you know, but he's using it for something different there. In this particular case, he's saying, oh, we hang out in the world of spirits until we get correspondence between our outer or inner natures. And so what he means there is we have an outer and an inner self. And I think that colloquially we would describe that as sort of the face we put up, you know, who we want people to see us as and who we really are. You know, obviously you can have somebody who seems like a really friendly person who's trying to sell you something, really genuinely cares about you, and then they leave and you find out you got scammed, right? It's not always apparent. And we can act like we're one thing and be another. And as long as we have that sort of dual existence, we're not ready to go to where we truly will be at home. So what he's saying is, in that first place we all go after death, in the world of spirits, that's where we're bringing our inner and outer nature into harmony. I want to talk more about it, but we got to keep moving because we got things to get through. Okay, so we'll go on. He says, in the following pages, I will be explaining just how we are prepared and led from one state of being into another. After we die, just as soon as we arrive in the world of spirits, we are carefully sorted out by the Lord. Evil people are immediately connected with the hellish community their ruling love had affiliated with them in the world, and good people are immediately connected with the heavenly community their love and kindness and faith had affiliated with them in the world. So this whole what is he talking about? And I'll try to shed a little light on it. Maybe you guys get it, but I find it, I've found it for a long time confusing, but now I'm starting to understand it. He says that, okay, so we have a body and a spirit, right? Now, this is not an after-death thing. We currently have a body and a spirit, and our body is somewhere. I'm in this room broadcasting over the computer. You're in your house or on the train or something with your phone seeing this, right? So our bodies are in a place. Our spirits are also in a place, he says, and that our spirits are in communities now in the afterlife, associated with people who are like us there. When we are getting good thoughts and feelings, like urges to be altruistic, to be ethical, to be compassionate, that's actually our spirit communicating in whatever, I don't know the exact manner of it, but with a heavenly or a good, kind community. And when we get those ego kind of things, those urges like, oh, you get revenge, get yours without thinking about the consequences, that's coming out from a negative or hellish community. And so that we are actually aligning ourselves with these afterlife communities based on what we act on. And so he's saying in the text that we remain connected to those communities after we die because that's who we've kind of got in with. Okay, so let's get back here. I'll unselect that giant thing. Even though we are sorted out in this way, we are still together in that world and can talk to anyone we want to. Sorry, I gotta stop right here. So he says, everybody's sorted out and connected to the communities that they were with. I hope this is making sense. They're connected to the communities that they're with, but even though we're sorted out in this way, we can still all get together and talk. So the sorting out is not moving everyone into those communities, it's just aligning your mind with them. That you're connected to. It's kind of like, you probably know somebody who you feel like gets all of their ideology and all their beliefs from some source. Like somebody watches a particular news channel or listens to some talk radio show, and all their opinions are formed by. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, maybe other people think you're that way, but or they think I'm that way, but I think they're that way. So you feel like you're kind of plugged into that community, right? And that's sort of what he's talking about there, is that you kind of you look to them for advice and feedback, but yet you can still be out hanging out with other people. There's not this separation that's coming. Okay, so that was my best attempt to explain that. Okay, so we're still together, even though we're sorted out in this way. Right, there we are. We are still together in that world and can talk to anyone we want to friends and acquaintances from our physical life, especially husbands and wives, also brothers and sisters. I have seen a father recognizing and talking with his 6 sons. I have seen many other people with their relatives and friends. However, since they differed in character because of their life in the world, they parted company after a little while. So that's a nod to, most people, when they have the near-death experience, that's the first thing we're talking about, is the people we love are there to greet us. And Swedenborg, by the time he was writing this, had so much experience with the afterlife that he wasn't as overcome by that now. So we just get a little nod to it now. So that's what he's talking about with this here, just kind of that, oh yeah, I saw my relatives, I saw my grandma there, that you can meet and talk with all those people in this initial phase. So, moving on. However, people who go into heaven from the world of spirits do not see people who go into hell, and vice versa. Nor do those in each group recognize the others in it unless they have a similar character because of a similarity in what they love. So here he's kind of talking about similarities, internal similarities, like in what they love, meaning what they care about, what they value. That affects you so much that it affects who you see. That world is very very character based. I mean, it's called the spiritual world, as in the internal part of us that thinks and feels and cares is a spirit, and that world is the spiritual world. So what you care about, the things that take place in our spirits here, our thinking, our feeling, and all that, actually shape that world and shape what you see there. And all. So that's my stab at what he's talking about there. So nor do those in each group recognize unless they have a similarity in what they love. The reason they can see these other people when they are in the world of spirits, but not when they are in heaven or hell, is that while they're in the world of spirits, they are brought into states of being like those they were in during their physical lives, one after another. And I wonder if I was seeing that little phrase there, and I was wondering, is that the life review? You know, people talk about a life review in near-death experiences, where they say, "Oh, I went through everything in my life, and I saw like how it was making other people feel, how it was making me feel." You guys have probably read something about it like that, and I wonder if that little phrase there is him describing that. And it's interesting to take a look at that kind of stuff because you got this similarity between something that was written so long ago, it was 250 years ago, and the modern near-death experience. So I find that fascinating. Anyway, let's get back to looking at the text. Yeah, one after another. After a while, though, they settle into a constant state of being. They settle into a constant state of being that agrees with the state of their ruling love. All right. So, anyway, you get down to, in the end, sort of what matters. Ruling love. Sorry, I'm pausing because I see so many things that I think, oh, I should say more about that. I should say more about that. I should say more, because there's so many, and I think you're seeing as we're going along here, he's using a lot of terms and having a lot of concepts that unless you're familiar with him, you may not have heard or may not have heard described in that way. So ruling love is, what do you care about the most? You know, like you see people who, a tornado's coming, it's going to flatten their house, and afterwards they're saying, you know, all I care about is that my family was safe. You know, ruling love. Like or if you knew nobody, if you knew there was no consequences, you couldn't get caught, where would we go? You know, that's the ruling love. It's what's you know, most important to everyone. So anyway, let's keep rolling. In this state of being, people recognize each other only if what they love is similar. Since similarity unites and dissimilarity separates. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Dissimilarity separates, right? That makes sense, and it happens within us now. You know, if you can be in a room with people who you have nothing in common with, and you're there with them, but you're not quite connected like you would be to someone who had similar interests. Just as the world of spirits is a state of being halfway between heaven and hell, it is also a halfway place. As I mentioned earlier, the hells are underneath it, and the heavens above it. So we're going back to talking about the geography, sort of the thing. All the hells are closed on the side that faces that world being the world of spirits that he's talking about, that you first go into, and are accessible only through holes and crevices like those in rocks, and through broad gaps that are guarded to prevent anyone from coming out without permission, which is granted only in cases of real need. So look at that there. So there's hell, but you can't come out of there unless there's real need. And what real need are we talking about? And I think that Swedenborg talks a lot about usefulness, or performing some function to serve the whole, and that everyone in the afterlife, as we are in this life to an extent with division of labor, we're focused on some goal. You know, you go to a job and you try to help society in that way, or you're raising a child and you're helping society in that way. Whatever you're doing is a function you're performing on the world, and that in the afterlife that just increases. Like everybody can do something special that other people can't do, and that even people, so the people who are in this state of mind that's called hell, which is essentially, as he describes it, being completely negatively self-centered, and wanting only caring about yourself, and to the point where you want everything that belongs to other people, you want to take it from them, and you want the power, essentially power over other people. So even if you're in that state of mind, you can still serve a purpose. You can still help the greater good, even if it's not necessarily what you want, but you can still, even if you're sort of tricked into it, you can be performing some function that's this. Okay, you can come out, you can come this way, but you're on work release or something like that here. Anyway, so let's take another look. Without permission granted in cases of real need. Heaven too is bounded on all sides, and the only access to any heavenly community is by a narrow way whose entry is also guarded. These exits and entrances are what are called the doors and gates of hell and heaven in the Word. And whenever he says Word, he's talking about the Bible. This is another huge tangent, but it's basically saying, he basically says that in the Bible there's an allegory, a symbolism that runs through the entire thing, and it has to do with this spiritual world that he's visited. It has to do with our lives. It has to do with our minds, and this is something for a whole other class. But what you can take away from it here is that he's saying, when he says the Word in something like this, he's talking about the Old and New Testaments of the Bible as we know it today. The world of spirits looks like a valley surrounded by mountains and cliffs, with glens and rising ground here and there. That's the next sentence. But I thought it goes with that picture. People come back from near-death experiences and that kind of stuff with all kinds of descriptions, amazing things. So it's just always interesting to hear some sensory detail about it. He goes really in detail about things how things look and how they sound and how they smell, all this stuff. But there he just gives you a little taste. So I wanted to represent that visually. So let's take a look here at what he says after that. With glens, rising ground here and there, the doorways and entrances to heavenly communities become visible only to people who have been readied for heaven, and no one else finds them. And it's interesting that he says that, I was talking before about the idea of correspondences. Well, he also says that there's a correspondence between sight and understanding, grasping. That's why, and it's slipped into our language. That's why we say, if we understand something, we say, "I see." Well, that's how it is for the spirit. So in the next world, if you don't understand the life of heaven, which is a life of selfless love, like you would rather have someone else happy than you be happy, because you want to give your happiness even to them. That's the way of heaven. If someone doesn't understand that, they can't even see the ways that you could walk into heaven, because it's simultaneously it's a place and a state of mind. So if that makes sense. There is one entrance going from the world of spirits to each community, and beyond that there is only one path. But as the path goes upward, it splits into many. So that's something. I realize now that I've been talking for a long time, and I would like to get to some comments and questions, get some other voices in there. If you're just joining us, or you didn't hear me, or you forgot the first time, to leave a comment or a question to get it into this discussion. It depends on if you're watching it on YouTube, just leave a comment like you'd comment below the video. If you don't have a YouTube account, go back to the Facebook page, Heaven and Hell Swedenborg, where you click the link initially, leave a comment in that section, and then that'll be up there. We'll take a look at it. We'll bring it in here, and hopefully that can be good fodder for talk. If you're having trouble with any of that, just leave a comment wherever you are, and we'll try to find you and let you know how to work it and how to do it. So that's a little bit about, and it doesn't have to. If you want to make it be a tangent, it can be. It doesn't have to be. Like I said, this is supposed to be a sort of a broad discussion group. I'm using this, Swedenborg stuff to move it along. But if it's something that you want to, that's just on your mind, even if it's not related, let's talk about it. So let's talk about something right now. What's our first comment question? Some people don't have the opportunity to sort themselves, since he does say some people barely enter into it and are promptly either taken up into heaven or thrown down into hell. So that's a good comment. So, that's from YouTube. So it was on YouTube. So excellent comment. So that is somebody's mentioning. Okay, so some people. What we're looking at here, from what I understand, is fairness. Like it says, some people are almost immediately go up or down, and do those people get the same opportunity? Like, is that fair? Like, what if you pull the short straw and it's like, okay, you have 5 minutes to sort yourself out, So the way that I understand that is, he says that it's based on the correspondence between our inner and outer states. As in, have you guys ever, there's a show that's called American Greed, and I was watching this one about, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Kids for Cash scandal. Long story short, there was a couple of judges and a couple of builders who got really, really rich off of throwing kids into juvenile detention who didn't deserve to be there and keeping them there because they made money off of it. So pretty heinous crime. It led some of those kids to commit suicide. It was a huge scandal. But the judges and stuff and the builders outwardly appeared like really upstanding, great citizens who wouldn't be capable of just playing with people's lives like that. So they were very discordant. They're external and they're internal. But when Swedenborg, if they were in the world, one thing Swedenborg says is you can never make spiritual judgments, meaning you can never say someone's motives or if they're a good or bad person. Even if there's something that seems really bad, like those people with that thing, you can make an external judgment saying that's not a good thing to do. If you really did that intentionally, then that's bad. But we don't know what's going on in anybody's heart and mind. So what I'm saying is, if there was someone who was really doing that out of the just a care for money, that didn't care at all about people's lives, but acted like they did, there's a lot of discord. You get to the spiritual world, you have to sort it out, you have to get similar external, internal. But you probably know some people who are just open and honest and nice. They already say what's on their mind in a good way, and that what they're not scheming there. So they're already pretty much sorted out. If you are, and that's actually what Swedenborg says we're trying to build towards, in this life is getting it so that who we appear to be and who we really are similar, So if we've already done a lot of that work here and we're close, you don't have to spend all your time dragging your feet in the spiritual world. You can get right to heaven, if you already have made major choices. So that's what he's talking about there. It's not just some people get less time to figure it out. I hope that makes sense. We got more comments, so let's take a look at the next one from YouTube. The virtuality of the spiritual world being here and now is so correspondential, as a Swedenborg word, or sometimes, to the virtual world of this broadcast to like-minded individuals. So we're bringing heaven on earth now. Good. Well, I'm glad that you feel like there's a little something heavenly about that. But it does bring up this good point that back when Swedenborg was writing, there was nothing that paralleled the internet. In any sense of the word, there's some mail that you could send slowly. But however, since then we've had this thing evolve where we can talk instantaneously based on interest. You found this because you were interested in this kind of thing, which is in a lot of ways, and I could go on a huge tangent about that as well. A lot of ways, it's similar. The spiritual world that Swedenborg describes is similar to the web. So it's an interesting. And is that, if there really is a spiritual world like that, is that it sort of manifesting itself, making, that as in heaven, so upon the earth, right? Is it making it so that we have similar things here? All right, we'll get to one more comment before we get back to the text. So it seems as if similar to how we are here on earth, and that we gravitate to where the love of our being takes us. So yeah, so there is some of that here. I mean, you do find people, there are people who go certain places because of the culture there. You know, you have like even in the United States, you have like the West Coast, California is generally liberal. There's like the Bible Belt where there's a lot of Christianity. There are kind of areas that have certain kinds of people in them, and people do go gravitate, or even locally. You know, you move into town, you want to look up, oh, where are the groups of people that are like me? And in the spiritual world, that is just at a whole new level, to the point where he actually says thought brings presence. So if you're thinking about someone and they're favorably thinking of you, you guys will appear in the same room. Kind of like the web and how you can do the same thing through Skype now, but you couldn't back in the day. All right, excellent questions and comments, or I guess those are comments. Let's get back to the text and move on, and we'll have more of those as we go forward. All right, so we were here. This is talking a little bit about hell, and hell is going to be a sticking point because it's a nasty idea, and there's also been a much more nasty idea sort of propagated throughout the world, which is this idea of hell as this place of torture. Swedenborg's can appear a little similar, but it's an entirely different phenomenon. And I'll try to show you what I mean. So the doorways and gates to the hells, he calls them the hells instead of hell, because there are many different. Nobody's spot in the life after death is exactly the same. Are visible only to the people who are about to enter them. The gates open for them, and then they can see dark, sooty-looking caves slanting downwards into the depths, where there are still more gates. Rank, foul stenches breathe out from them. Good spirits flee from these odors because they are repelled by them, but evil spirits are drawn toward them because they find them enjoyable. And if you look at that sums it up, that you don't have, when he says evil spirits, he means people who love evil. And by evil, killing, stealing, harming intentionally. You can grow to love that. I mean, you just watch, A&E, or what are the channel Bio that has like all these murder shows on it, and you see like people who become serial killers or something. That's the highlight of their life, is doing that kind of. So and Swedenborg says that in the afterlife, if you grow to love something filthy like that, like killing or stealing or hurting in some way, you actually love all kinds of filthy things, including these smells that come out, and your average person is gonna, oh, that's disgusting. But if you love it, you're like, that's exactly where I want to be. Good spirits flee from these odors because they are repelled by them, but evil spirits are drawn toward them. They find them enjoyable. In fact, just as we enjoy our own evil in this world, we find enjoyment after death in the stench that corresponds to our evil, or that embodies it. So that's what I was just saying. This can be compared to the enjoyment shown by carrion birds and beasts, such as crows and wolves and pigs, which fly or run towards rotting corpses as soon as they get wind of them. I heard one man who screamed aloud in utter torment at a breath of air from heaven, but was calm and happy when a breath from hell reached him. So that calm and happy, it's just that's, he's not saying that the life of hell, which is, again, the life of hell is a state of mind. It is what we would call probably ego, self-centered. All you care about is how things are going to affect you. You see other people as pawns, to get what you want to. You'll manipulate and use them to get what you want. That lifestyle is what he's talking about as hell. So that's what you find comfort in, and it's not going to be a comfortable, happy life, because as we all know, the more you are in your ego, the less happy you are, because the more that anytime things don't go your way, when things go your way, you're happy. When they don't go your way, you're miserable. You alienate people. You lose friends. All this kind of stuff. So, but it's just interesting there that he's saying, like if that's what you're into, when you get close to the hell that is representative of this state in you, you're, I can breathe here. That whole mutual love stuff, it's up top. I don't want it. Anyway, so that's that, and I want to talk a little bit about what we just showed for a second there, which is the two doors in each of us. there are two doors, so to speak, within each of us as well. One facing hell and open to evil and false things from there. The other facing heaven and open to good and true things from there. So one of the biggest, or one of the most essential, prominent messages in Swedenborg is this idea of what the subconscious is. The collective unconscious. Where do thoughts and feelings come from? And here he's saying that not literally, but we sort of have an input for heaven and an input from hell into both of us. And you can kind of see that in your day-to-day. You'll get perfectly lovely thoughts about other people, about what you should do, and you'll get really nasty ones. And so he's saying we have these two doors, and we can choose what we open. So there's more on the doors. The door to hell is open for people who focus on what is evil and the falsity that comes from evil, though just a little light from heaven flows in through certain cracks, which enables us to think, reason, and speak. On the other hand, the door to heaven is open for people who focus on what is good and thus on what is true. So good and truth, evil and falsity, this is probably the primary duality. There's in Swedenborg, the duality of good and truth versus evil and falsity. And within each of those, the duality of good and truth and evil and falsity. And they are sort of what they sound like. Good is being good, it's love, it's an emotional thing, and truth is accurate fact. But there's more to it, and the real truth is using the truth in a loving way. And falsity would be, even if you take somebody who has statistics about something, but manipulates those to make them seem like they're saying something other than what they're really saying, that would be falsity. So if you get into Swedenborg at all, if this class hasn't completely turned you off from that forever, then you're going to see good and truth everywhere, all over his. And I'm still learning what he really means by that. But something is approximately good is what we would call good motivations, and evil is what we would call evil, and truth and falsity are what they stand for. However, there's more nuances to it. So he's saying that the good and the truth are coming from heaven, and the evil and the falsity are coming from hell. There are actually two paths that lead to our rational mind. One from above the mind or from inside it, and just briefly, he equates what is inmost with what is highest. Like you can say there's the highest heavenly state in you, but it's also the deepest inside you. And the same with the most external is the lowest. And you kind of have that, if you're shallow, that, anyway. Sorry, there's so many tangents I could go on, and I'm trying to keep it reasonably short on each one, but obviously there's a lot more we can talk about, and a lot more to learn if you get into Swedenborg and read it. So, one from above the mind or from inside it, through which goodness and truth enter from the Lord, and one from below the mind or from outside it, through which evil and falsity infiltrate from hell. The rational mind itself is in the middle, where these two paths meet. So the more light from heaven is let in, the more rational we are. And the more light that is shut out, the less rational we are, however this situation may appear to us. And he talks about light from heaven. And this same thing I was talking about before with understanding, being, you see and you understand. So he talks about sort of the rational capacity or the ability to perceive what's true that flows in from heaven into the mind as spiritual light. So if you say, because we say, oh, why are you up on that hill meditating all the time? I want to be enlightened. These kinds of things work their way into our vocabulary and terminology. And Swedenborg is saying they have a spiritual origin. And I have been saying a lot in a row, so let's actually hear what some of you have to say. We have the next question. So this is from YouTube, and it says, can anyone do what Swedenborg did? And by what Swedenborg did, I'm presuming that it's talking about visiting the spiritual world. With Swedenborg, it got to where he was lucidly, and what kind of differentiates him in some ways from from people who have had like a one-time near-death experience is that Swedenborg, for the latter half of his life, or the latter part of his life, could visit the spiritual world at will and lucidly, as in he could control where he went, who he talked to, what he learned. You know, he didn't always get exactly what he wanted, but he could navigate pretty adeptly. So I mean, there are levels. Swedenborg says that people were meant to live in both worlds at the same time. There was meant to be open communication between the worlds. And actually, way back in the day, with the earliest people, as he called them, you know, back when we're just figuring out how long ago that was based on, you know, digging up fossils and studying biology. How long ago were the first humans living? I don't know. He doesn't comment on that. But he says that the earliest people, and you could sort of still see this in some indigenous cultures around the world, they had open contact with the spiritual world. As in, you know, now it's like, okay, I lost somebody I care about, but I can't hear from them or see them. Back then, you could have open communication with them. That people would get direct revelations. They would have dreams. It's a lot more like now. People say, if there's angels and God, why aren't they talking to us? Well, back then they could. So that's the way it used to be, and that's the way it is meant to be. And that if things all got back to that sort of pristine state, we would all be able to do what Swedenborg is doing, which is, you know, to see the other side. But that's not to say that there aren't a lot of people who are doing that currently. I mean, you have the near-death experience phenomenon, which is when people, if you haven't heard of that, it's basically based on some kind of life-threatening injury or illness. You leave your body, you have this experience. You know, there are some themes that run through them all, but you see another reality, and you come back, and you're moved. So people are having those. I mean, millions of people. They're thinking that it's even something huge, like 5% of the U.S. population, just measuring the U.S. Like some huge number has had a near-death experience. But there's also all these other spiritual experiences. People will see things, and some people that I talk to in the work that I'm doing with the Swedenborg Foundation, they say, oh yeah, I see and talk to spirits all the time. So what Swedenborg doesn't lay out is a clear path to how to get there, and he says that unless you know what you're doing there, it's just like if you're going to a big city here with no knowledge of what you're going to run into. You need to. It's not all rosy there. So, but what he doesn't say is how to get there. Although he does sort of lay out this whole plan for how to, you know, do spiritual growth. You know, become a more and more in tune, loving person, and that can actually gets you more prepared for that way to open. As for what mechanisms that would be to actually get that to happen and how you do it, I don't know, but I bet there are many people who have thoughts on that. If you guys want to add your comments on either the Heaven Now page or the YouTube page about that, go ahead. You can be answering each other's questions too, because you may know more about it than me. I'm just facilitating this discussion right now. Okay, so there's my best answer on that, and we have another one, and this one is also from YouTube. Oh, this very much relates to it. I may have already exhausted this one. Are there any techniques cited by Swedenborg? So Swedenborg was very, for how much he wrote, he says very little about how to pursue the path of seeing the spiritual world on his own. He writes a lot, volumes and volumes, about how to grow spiritually, how to, he has this whole thing about repentance, reformation, and regenerate, you know, how to do really well, you know, how to follow this certain path that will align you with everything, that will make you into a loving person, that will make you enjoy life, bring you peace, this kind of stuff. He talks about that a lot, but he doesn't really talk about how to induce a spiritual experience. And maybe, you know, it could be that back in his day it wasn't as doable as it is now. For him, I mean, he definitely did some breathing techniques, and he would meditate, or as he called it, meditating. But I don't know if that was what started it or not. So I don't know if that's very helpful, but I think that's where I am with it right now. And we're going to do one more comment question. This says, God loves us so much he lets us have what we love, no matter how perverted. Hell is eternal, self-determined justice. So that's an interesting thought on the nature of hell. And hell is like this, because you kind of have this thing floating around, which is this idea of hell, which is that there's an eternal torture, a place of torture. That if you break a rule or any number of rules or don't say the right thing on earth, you get put there, and the point of it is to cause you pain as revenge for not following the rules right, or something like that. And what this person is alluding to, and what Swedenborg is alluding to, is that hell is a state of mind, that hell is just the natural consequences of loving what is nasty. And I go back because I just watched last night this show about these people who were doing this Kids for Cash thing, that you love money so much that you're willing to sort of commit these crimes against humanity for it. And obviously that can go to even greater extremes with dictators and various kinds of criminals, and that there are consequences that come with it. And that's just, it's built into this life, it's built into the next life, and it's kind of you reap what you sow, and it's not, the consequences aren't there to make you suffer. They're to try to get you to stop and to keep you from being able to harm other people, because we don't want to all have to suffer just because you decided that you like to rip people off or something like that. All right, and we'll have one more chance to get to questions and comments at the end. So if you have any more, write them up now and we'll get to them. Okay, let's get back into the text. I have mentioned these things so that our correspondence with heaven and hell may be known. And there he's saying correspondence as in our interaction with heaven and hell. It's not all about life after death. This is an everyday thing. This is happening for us today. We're interacting with heaven and hell in our own ways. While our rational mind is in the process of being formed, it corresponds to the world of spirits. What is above it belongs to heaven, and what is beneath it belongs to hell. In people who are being readied for heaven, the higher aspects of the mind open, and the lower close against the inflow of evil and falsity. And he says, in people who are being readied for heaven, and it sounds like it's a passive thing, and so what is that? Is God just choosing certain people and getting them to go to heaven and preparing them for heaven? But really, why he says it like that is, this heaven is a state of mind, as we were talking about before. It's the state of selfless love, of humility, of a desire to be helpful, and also a pushing away of the leanings toward doing things that are harmful to other people. And when we start that journey, it's God's power or God's influence is carrying us along that, but we have to initiate it. So that's why it says are being prepared, because the fuel for that is coming from God. But it's not like God is picking and choosing favorites there. So I thought I'd just try to think of what might be striking somebody wrong and try to get to it. So as a result, so in people who are being readied for hell, the lower aspects open and the higher close against the inflow of goodness and truth. As a result, the latter people can look only downward toward hell, and the former people can look only upward toward heaven. And he's talking about spiritually, not that your neck is literally stuck in one position, but in that where we're looking toward, where we're aspiring toward, where we're getting our information from. Looking upward is looking toward the Lord, because he's the common center that everything in heaven faces. Looking downward, though, is looking away from the Lord toward the opposite center, the center toward which everything in hell faces and gravitates. So that's it. That's the first segment, and that's just like 4 or 5 short pages of this. As you can see, there's a lot there, and there's a lot of really complex, sort of nuanced stuff. Maybe it came off to you as like, okay, yeah, I've heard it all before, but you can see that there are, if you don't know what he means by a lot of these things, you can have a very different interpretation moving through the text, and that's part of why I wanted to get this going, because often, on the places you guys are watching from, the Facebook Heaven and Hell, YouTube Off the Left Eye, it'll be like, okay, here's something. Where did you get this from? Oh, it's from Swedenborg. Here, read this book. But when you actually open up Swedenborg and get into him, you might see something that you might read a few sentences and get a very different impression than what he's actually saying. And I have personally found that once you start to understand what he's trying to say more and more in a greater sense, you see, oh, this is cool. This is cool, and this is loving, and this is fair, and this is good. Um, but you don't always see that when you first come across it. It's got a rough sort of exterior. So I wanted to walk through some of this, and even I'm learning about this kind of stuff all the time, and it's cool to hear what you guys are thinking about it. That said, let's get to our last questions, comments. So let's see, we have another one here. Having an NDE, my experience was whatever I thought was where I went immediately. So that's awesome. NDE, just for you guys, is a short for near-death experience. So this is I love it when somebody who's had an experience like this talks a little bit about it, because I want to hear. I'm interested. That's part of why I'm interested in Swedenborg. So they're saying that they had this experience. Oh, no, thank you for sharing. Like, I appreciate you putting that out there. They've had this experience, and what they thought about was where they went immediately, and that's very much what Swedenborg reported. He said thought brings presence, and you kind of see this phenomenon within our minds, because the mind is spiritual according to him. So if you're thinking about a person or a place, it's not like, ooh, I'm here in Oklahoma and I want to think about Japan. Okay, it's taking a long time for my thought to get all the way from where I am to Japan. You think about it right away. You think about a person. It doesn't matter how far they are. There's no delay there. And so maybe what this person here who was commenting was experiencing is the instantaneousness of the spirit. And how would that? I mean, that's exciting in a way. Like, oh, I want to go to the beach. You're there. So I'd love to hear more about that. And so anybody who's had any kind of experiences like that, feel free to write in the comments about them, or send us a message or something like that, because it's always cool to hear about that sort of stuff. So I think that's a good stopping place. We made it through our first segment. We heard some cool things from people. Thank you guys for hanging out. So obviously this is our first show. We're getting our bearings. We're figuring out how we want to do this. The purpose is to get thought and conversation around life after death, around spirituality, and give people kind of a way to understand and comprehend Swedenborg. And get in there and see what he's really saying, and look for these parallels and these similarities, because if there's really a truth about the afterlife, about the nature of reality on a deeper level, many people will have seen it from many different angles. There should be these commonalities that we find, so we can actually see a bit of this thing that we're all a part of now and all going to be going towards. So thank you for being with me on this show. Really appreciate it. If you liked it, want to support it, the Swedenborg Foundation is a nonprofit organization, and this show and all the music and lights and technology and work that went into it, it's all made possible by donations. It's a tax-deductible 501c3. If you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook, there's a link there that you can just click and make a PayPal donation. We actually have a gift from a foundation that will match 5 to 1 right now. So if you just give $5, they'll pitch in 25, and $30 will go towards continuing things like this, but also spreading it, because there's people who might be interested, and that money helps reach that. So thanks for that. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here. It's been really cool hanging out with you guys. We're gonna do this. We're gonna try to do this every Monday. We're gonna work our way through this book, and if we're still having fun at the end of it, we'll choose something else, work our way through there. And if you're watching this in post, like you couldn't get to it live, still feel free to write your comments down, and maybe we can address them next week, or we'll address them with a text response or something like that. All right. It's been really nice to see you. Thanks so much for being a part of it. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next week.